Hello, students. My name is Professor Wikan Kim, professoring at Inha University, Incheon, Korea. And this section introduces the definition of international relations and the state of nature and the concepts and assumptions of anarchy. Also, the goal of this section is to help students understand the essence of international affairs and how they operate and on what principles. Okay, before I start this section, let me make a statement. The globe is getting smaller and smaller, and human beings are getting faster and faster. I think this is a provoking and interesting statement, don't you think? Because the development of the technologies of communications and transportation, people move faster and faster, and we can reach each corner of the world within 24 hours. And also we can reach and touch out someone with our technological devices, such as the mobile telecommunication system and SNS and etc. etc. So the globe is getting smaller and smaller. We are getting one family as a whole world. So we see the increasingly populating the world and the mass media and the other institutions. And also we are witnessing the multiplying and popping up of the frequencies and the numbers of the contacts between the human beings and between the international organizations and between the national governments. So the so-called international relations, there are the relations among states, are having three levels of relationship. First, the relations of states with each other, and second, with international organizations, and third, certain subnational entities. Okay, level first. International relations means the relations with other states. In this level one, there are many institutions and organizations and their subjects are involved in interstate activities. Within the state, there are many organizations and institutions and individuals. And these subjects are contacting, have relations with their counterparts in the other states or other states. So the so-called relations with other states. In level two, international relations means the relations with international organizations. There are so many international organizations in the world. Let me make some examples. First, WTO. I think everybody knows what the WTO is. The World Trade Organization. So World Trade Organization is doing a lot of things. First, it makes some rules or procedures or regulations on the behaviors of states in their trades, international trades. And also WTO steps in or meddles in the conflicts or disputes between or among states in their trades. Or they help those states mediate or reconcile their disputes. So each state has many contacts with the WTO in their trade behavior. A second example could be IMF or WB. IMF means the World International Monetary Fund, and WB means World Bank. When a country needs help in economic terms, it needs money, and it can borrow money either from IMF or World Bank. Or sometimes a country can be bankrupted, and also it can help from those international organizations, IMF mostly. Another help could be OECD. the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Currently, there are 38 member states in OECD. And certainly, the OECD is mediating, reconciling each country's economic policies, and also it helps developing countries make their economic development policies. But not all OECD countries are rich countries. 7 G7 countries and few other countries are considered as advanced countries. And the last example I would like to make is ILO, International Labor Organization. Certainly, the ILO does a lot of things in order to improve working conditions and other extra facilities for the workers in each country. Now, the third level is international relations with subnational entities. What I mean by subnational entities is that these are not the governmental governments or states organizations. They are existing within the state, such as bureaucracies. These people are representing their countries, and political parties, and interest groups, perhaps the labor organizations, or doctors' associations, or workers' associations, those interest groups, and sometimes individuals. So sometimes each country has to deal with these subnational entities. Okay, next, in order to understand what the international relations are all about, I think we better understand the domestic politics and compare domestic politics with the international politics. So let's talk about domestic politics. So what is politics? So many people and scholars and pundits and politicians talked about what the politics is all about. But among other things, Professor David Easton of University of Chicago had a brilliant definition of politics. According to David Easton, politics is the authoritative allocation of scarce or limited values. Authoritative distribution of limited resources. What I mean by authoritative means the authenticity or authority of those policies, and which subjects are making authoritative policies. First, government. Of course, government makes the most of the authentic authoritative policies. Second, legislature. Congress, National Assembly certainly make a lot of policies too. And sometimes people's consent are very significant in making policies by the legislature and the government. This is what I mean by authoritative policies. And what about the limited values or limited scarce resources? Resources, people could be an important resource, and money, well, property, or natural resources. So politics is the authentic distribution of the scarce resources. This is a very significant definition of domestic politics. But now, what about international politics? Can we make any specific definition of international politics like domestic politics? My answer could be not really, not really. There could be many similarities and differences between the domestic politics and international politics. Let's talk about the similarities first. In order to answer this, we have to ask this question. What are the elements of domestic society? First, people and administration and legislature and court. These are the main elements of domestic society. What about international society? Obviously, there's an international court in Hague. And administration, the United Nations. In the legislature, also United Nations. So there are many similarities between domestic politics and international politics. But what are the differences between them? The fundamental difference between them is whether there's the central government or not. In domestic politics, there's a central government. But in international politics, there's no such a thing. There's no such a thing. Okay, as I mentioned, there's no central government in international relations. And what does the no central government mean? Without the central government, we can expect anarchy, because the anarchy means the absence of government. In domestic society, the central government enforces the law or regulations and punishes the people or other institutions. What about international society? There's no such a thing. Obviously, the League of Nations after the First World War and the United Nations after World War II have not performed those functions. So the absence of central government means the state of anarchy.